Now, I've read from this little book of mine quite a few times, a number of times. Of course, it's called Allow Me to Introduce. It is my introductions and prefaces and comments on other people's works. So it's a collections of my writings that I consider some of my best works that don't really get the same attention as books that I've completely written myself. So was in the position of having a collection of some of what I consider my best and most thoughtful works. Probably among the least read. So the good folks at Weiser were thoughtful enough and kind enough and generous enough to allow me to collect those and put them in this Allow Me to Introduce. And I'm going to read a little something from it today. I'm not sure I've ever read what I'm going to read today, but Weiser also asked me to curate a collection of my favorite horror stories and horror writings that influenced me as an impressionable youth. They've often said that the golden age of science fiction and horror is 14. That's true. Be that as it may, they asked me to if I would curate, edit, and introduce a collection of my favorite and most influential horror stories. And they put them together in a collection called the Weiser Antiquarian Curiosity Shop, and under my editorship. And they're all published just in 99-cent Kindle type format. And so they're literally bonbons. But I had great fun doing it. And in doing it, I was, of course, couldn't pass up an incredibly influential character in American horror, anyway. Somebody who came after Edgar Allan Poe, but still shortly before H.P. Lovecraft. And it's obvious to many of us that Lovecraft was greatly influenced by the work of Chambers, and that Chambers was greatly influenced by the work of Poe. Now, instead of reading you any Chambers, he's most famous for a series of stories loosely collected as under the title The King in Yellow. And but he wrote other things too, and I'll talk about it in a second. But anyway, if you've never read any of the King in Yellow series, you might want to avail yourself, treat yourself, if you will, to sort of Gilded Age H.P. Lovecraft, or a Gilded Age Edgar Allan Poe. Now, several of Chambers' stories appeared in on the Twilight Zone and things like that. So he may be obscure, but he was the most famous and most successful writer of fiction in the late 1800s. In other words, he actually made money writing, which is probably proof of his supernatural power. Okay. He's obviously in league with the devil if he actually made a living being a writer. Anyway, that being said, here's what I said just at the end where I'm talking about the various authors that are included in my introductions. And start off with Robert W. Chambers. Oh, I got Aleister Crowley in here. I've got Poe. I've got Lovecraft. I've got all sorts of people in that Weiser Antiquarian Curiosity Shop. So it's a nice collection of stuff. Okay. But anyway, Robert W. Chambers, 1827 through 1911. Now, I think that is incorrect. I think he made it later. I think he was, this is either a typo or something was, I think it was 1865 to 1933, actually. But anyway, if H.P. Lovecraft is the Christ of horror, then most assuredly Robert W. Chambers was his John the Baptist. Recently, it was my privilege to introduce and curate a series of short stories first published in 1895 under the collective title The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers. To avoid paraphrasing myself, I've appended a portion of my introduction below. While I refer specifically to the King in Yellow, my observations of Chambers' style, technique, and imagination apply also to our Chambers selection, The Messenger. That's included in this book. Okay. Perhaps you've heard of the King in Yellow. No, neither had I until a few years ago when a filmmaker contacted me and informed me he was making a film of the King in Yellow and asked if I'd be interested in appearing in a cameo role in his production. Before I gave him my answer, the project, of course, was later abandoned. Okay. I did a bit of digging and discovered a most remarkable treasure. A terrifying work of American horror that predates by a quarter of a century the first short story by H.P. Lovecraft. Indeed, The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers is arguably the archetypal inspiration for what would become an entire genre of horror fiction for which the immortal Lovecraft is ultimately credited. Now, here I've got the right date. Robert W. Chambers, 1865 to 1933, is not exactly a household name. But that's not always been the case. Late in his career, his romantic novels and historical fictions were wildly popular. His books, bestsellers. His magazine installments eagerly awaited. For a time, he was considered the most successful American literary figure of the day. Yet later and lighter offerings, while bringing him fame and a modest fortune, are forgettable bonbons compared to the strong meat and innovative brilliance of his horror fiction. The most notable of all his works is The King in Yellow, a collection of short stories whose plots are loosely connected to an infamous imaginary book and a play of the same title, banned universally because of its ominous tendency to drive mad those who read it or came in contact with it. Indeed, the terror begins immediately with the reader unsure whether or not madness and suicide will be the price he or she will pay for turning the page. I was a bit disoriented when I began reading The King in Yellow's opening story, a dizzying effect that I'm sure Chambers intended to induce in the minds of his gay 90s readers. The tale, called The Repairer of Reputations, takes place in the science fiction future of a 1920s New York City, a metropolis of street names, parks, and landmarks familiar to all of us today, which Chambers meticulously paints from his rich palette of images. He was, after all, a classically trained and skilled artist and designer. However, there is something disturbingly tweaked with the entire milieu of the story. It all takes place in a utopian and prosperous post-Civil War America, a blend of aristocratic republic and military dictatorship that could easily have evolved from the strange bedfellows of the Gilded Age's contending movements. Nationalistic laissez-faire capitalism and the liberal yet pragmatic ideals of social progressivism. From the opening lines, we're instantly plunged into an alternate reality where the comfortable and familiar past has been slightly altered, and we're forced to confront the infinite what-ifs of history, and in doing so, calling into question the objective reality of the present. Nestled within this surreal environment, we're introduced to a well-spoken narrator who first seems to be a faithful servant of the truth, but who will soon give us reason to doubt both his sanity and our own. But I won't spoil that for you. Like Lovecraft would do decades later, Chambers allows the reader's own imagination to do the heavy lifting of terror. In Casilda's song, which serves as an epigram for the entire work, is supposedly clipped from Act 1, Scene 2 of the play, The King in Yellow. And without burdening the reader's imagination with concrete certitudes, conjures the imagination of strange locales and vistas not of this earth, indeed not of this universe, and not only hints of characters of unspeakable power and horror. Here's a sample of that. Along the shore the clouds wave break, twin suns sink between the lake, the shadows lengthen in Carcosa. Strange is the night where black stars rise and strange moons circle through the skies, but stranger still is lost Carcosa. Songs the Hyades shall sing where flap the tatters of the king, must die unheard in dim Carcosa. Song of my soul, my voice is dead. Die thou, unsung as tears unshed shall dry and die in Las Carcosa. Hey, sounds like lyrics to a song. But I digress. Like all great works of horror, the story becomes disturbingly dark and terrifying in direct proportion to the degree to which our own hearts and minds are disturbed, dark, and frightened. So, if that whets your appetite for a little strange stuff, as we say, look into Robert W. Chambers. And if you don't want to spend a whole lot of money doing so, download I think it's 4 installments from the Weiser Antiquarian Curiosity Shop series, available Barnes & Noble, Amazon, everywhere. So anyway, that's a strange little detour today. I got to get on with my day because I'm preparing for ThelemaCon coming up in just a little over a week or so. Okay, until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. In dark Carcosa.